Hey, my name is Ryan, and you're watching Creative Sound Lab, a weekly video show where audio recording is an art form. Well, for this week's episode, I want to do something a little bit different because this weekend is actually a holiday weekend and I have family visiting. But this advice that I want to give you today, I have a few really cool concepts that really could make a big difference for the sound of your recordings. And you can apply these concepts to many different areas. But if you're having a difficulty getting to the next level, maybe you're not sure what you're doing wrong when you're making recordings or maybe when you're mixing, well, what I have for you today maybe could be that difference. This really could help you out a lot to get to that next step for you. And so today is really about learning how to use volume as a tool, learning how to use physical sound waves, the actual amplitude of sound waves, okay? The loudness in the room as a tool. Now, this is very different from a live room scenario, and maybe you have just a one-room studio where it's all in one room. I have two, but really, this live room, I have really loud drum sets, really loud guitar amps, and as soon as I step into the control room, it's a totally different mentality. In here, it's very appropriate to really push a guitar amp really loud to get certain sounds. You have to. It's very appropriate to really slam some drums because you cannot get a drum set to sound loud without forcefully playing it at full volume. And so it's a very different mentality. As soon as you step into the control room, you really need to start doing a different discipline as far as the volume, the loudness in the room that you have. And this is just beyond saving your ears. Okay, that's kind of a given that you should always, hearing protection as much as you can, and control the volume to minimize ear fatigue. But really, this is about making judgment calls, really understanding how the human ear works, and making sure that something as simple as turning down the volume can be the difference between making a decent recording and being where you can start making amazing recordings. And so I have three different areas that I'd like to kind of encourage you and, really try this stuff. See if it works for you. Three different areas that you can try turning the volume down. So the first area is really talking about the Fletcher-Munson curves. Now, I'm no scientist, but I've done a fair bit of research on this, and the human ear is not accurate. It's really designed to pick up like a human voice. It's really sensitive to like really whiny, like that frequency of like right at 2 and 3K. And so it's really designed not to hear deep bass and high end things like that. It's made really to hear the human voice, and so it definitely has its own little qualities of how it likes to work. And the human ear actually picks up sound, and you perceive sound differently at different volumes. See where I'm going with this? So one interesting thing that the Fletcher-Munson curves tells us is that if we turn the volume down from, say, 95 dB down to, let's say, 83 dB, then we're going to hear sound differently. At 83 dB, we hear actually the most even a human ear can perceive sound. But if you push it up into the 90s or maybe break 100, you hear a little more bass. You actually perceive pitches differently as well. The low frequencies sound a little lower. The high frequencies sound a little higher. I think I remember my research, it was like 15 to 20 cents higher and 15 to 20 cents lower. This is partly going back to my headphone episode with recording vocals, and if you have loud blaring headphones, then they may have issues with singing on pitch. It's nothing to do with their ability. It's all about how the human ear picks up pitches at loud volumes. And really, the third benefit to turning the volume down and how you're perceiving pitches and balances of EQ and stuff is, this just gives us a bird's eye view for the tone. So if we turn down the volume, we're able to hear the balance of the low frequencies, the mids, and the highs. We're able to perceive our pitches better, And really, we can tell if something's sticking out more. I've mentioned recently in an episode about compression and how just at lower volumes you can hear a little bit better what the compression is doing. And I know for my ears, that's typically what I've always noticed. Maybe you've noticed the same thing. And for me, it's just a part of this bird's eye view that turning down things and just listening and making decisions at lower volumes is just a better approach. Now, the next way we can be turning things down is actually at our converters. And this may be a little confusing, so really try to pay attention here. But basically, is our converters can only go so high, okay? When they hit the top, it's considered 0. Now, if you look at any sort of old mixing board, okay, or even the current ones that are used for live sound, you see 0, that's not exactly all the way at the top. There's actually room above that 0 on that fader. And if you look at the manual for that same mixer, there could be 20, 22, 23 dB of headroom above that 0. Now that 0 is a measurable amount of voltage. And then beyond that, it's just giving you an amount of headroom before it begins any distortion. I don't know if it's noticeable distortion or beyond a certain threshold that they measure. But they have a built-in headroom. And going back to our converters, if we hit 0, we get digital distortion, okay? So digital 0 is very different from analog 0, like on a mixer. And so what we have to do is literally turn down the amplitude of the signal that we're feeding our converters. This does a couple of things. It saves part of the, it reduces the stress on the analog portions of our converters. So if we have lots of, floor toms happening and bass guitar and, deep chugging guitars and things, if there's lots of low frequency happening, some would actually say that, okay, it's pushing, it's causing a lot of stress on the analog portions of the converters. If it's anything but the best converter, there's probably some compromises happening in the sound. You could start losing some fullness to the sound, some low frequency. Okay, I haven't tested this stuff, but that's the theory, okay? I've heard this said before. That's the theory, and it makes sense to me, okay? So you could be stressing part of the analog circuits, so turning it down lets you have a little bit fuller sound. But really what it comes down to is building in your headroom. So the old mixing consoles, and the live ones too, they have 20 dB of headroom and some change, right? And so what do we have to do to have that same headroom, the same punchy sound, with a digital system? Well, we have to consider that our 0 is now at, say, -20. And then above 20, we can count all the headroom out that we need. So if we want to do 25 dB headroom, well, basically just put a label over the numbers on the meters and relabel them as -25 as your 0. And then it'll go plus 25 from there. So you really have to rethink the way that you're looking at your faders. Now, if you're one that has a complete interface that has preamps and converters all built into one box and it plugs in directly to the computer, well, that's fine. You just got to monitor your signals on the computer. Just make sure you have plenty of headroom. I try to shoot for somewhere around 20 dB. It's okay if you hit 15, but really just try to watch your preamp. And this is really the only instance where the actual preamp is kind of what you're sending to the converter. Now, if you have outboard gear, I kind of think of it as two separate things. I think of it as the flavoring of the preamp that I want, and then I usually try to trim it back down to whatever the appropriate level is. Now, that appropriate level is always around -20 dB from digital 0. But depending on the flavor that I want from the preamp, I can be, putting it down at, say, click number 2 or clicking it up to click number, say, 6, right? And in which case I would be attenuating the signal back down to make sure that it's staying at that optimal level going into my converters, not pushing it too hard, giving me plenty of headroom. Now, one thing I do want to mention is just to make sure that you're recording at 24-bit. This way, you're still using tons of dynamic range. Even at -20 from digital 0, you're still using, I think, 21 bits of the information. So it's still well above CD quality that you're dealing with here. And the noise is just so far down there. It's not like tape hiss or something. You don't have to worry about, escaping the hiss and staying above it. So there's really nothing to worry about using this technique. It really just gets you back a lot of the fullness, gets you back a lot of the punch, and it really just preserves the sound that you have. Even if you don't have like a grade A converter, it'll get a little bit more out of your converter, a little bit better sound. And the next area I'd like to really encourage you to use these techniques of just turning the volume down is really during our mixing. Now this is all flowing together as one cohesive technique. It's really a mindset of how to do this, how to really work your levels and your volume. Like I said, volume is a tool for perceiving sound and judging sound, but it's also a way of processing sound correctly so that it's distorting at the guitar amp and not distorting at your converters or within a channel in your DAW. And really, this next point is really about the mixing workflow. So we've talked about judging sounds, we talked about the input into the converters at -20, and now those -20 sounds are nice and happy, and they're going to be kind of low. Now, how do we adjust this? Well, we're not going to take our master fader, the master output in the DAW, and just slam it up. We don't want to do that. Instead, we just want to take the volume of our monitors. Maybe you have a separate volume on your interface. Maybe you're running it through a mixer, just like I am, or maybe you have a knob that's dedicated to doing that. But really, you need to see that volume knob as your friend and just make the adjustment there to where you're comfortable, mixing at that volume, and leave the sounds in your DAW alone. Now, the way that I usually like to work is that the sounds really aren't pushing, above, say, -15 or so. And all the sounds are really, they're pretty low, but I'm going to be adding them together. And as they add together, just like they do in summing, they actually are going to be increasing to be a larger amount. If you take two synthesizers and duplicate them within a DAW and take more tracks and just duplicate those tracks, eventually, say if the tracks are all at, say, the sound is peaking at -6, well, it's only going to take one synthesizer to reach unity and then another one to clip. So within just 3 tracks, you're done for. You have to turn your volume down already. So what do? Well, you have to start with softer sounds, turn down the masters of those synthesizers so that when they add together, they're not clipping your master channel, your master out. So this is where the -20 comes into play here, because we have all our sounds that are just really acting nicely. And really what I like to do is add compression, just various layers of compression as I mix, and I'm adding gain during that portion. And so I compress and then I add makeup gain. And during that makeup gain, maybe I'll add just a noticeably more gain to my sound, and I'm slowly bringing up my mix. Now, all the faders, they have a really good resolution. You can make really cool, really fine details around unity on your faders. And you'll notice at the very bottom of the faders, between 40 and 60, it's really, really tightly grouped. It's very coarse adjustments. And so, this whole technique allows me to keep my faders kind of towards the top, where they actually have a finer resolution for making changes. So as I'm, adding tracks together, they're summing together, and they're going to be a little hotter on my master bus, just like what I'm saying here with the synthesizers and things. I'm adding layers of gain through compressors and maybe a little EQ and other things. And then eventually I end up with a mix that's about sitting around -10. And I've worked with several mastering engineers. They all seem to be just fine with -10. I'm happy to make any changes to that, but really it gives the mastering engineer room to work with. It's not like right up at the top. Plus, I maintain all my headroom, so if there's something that just kind of pokes out, maybe it's a kick drum, it's going to be preserved. And I allow the mastering engineer to deal with that issue, using his equipment and his decisive use of his tools. Okay, so I know this episode really wasn't as hands-on as what I like to usually do, but let's just review quickly what the 3 points were. We talked about the Fletcher-Munson effect, about how it affects how we perceive sounds. And we talked about the headroom of the converters and how we can build in our headroom to get better punch and better fullness out of our recordings. And then we also talked about the mixing workflow, how we can avoid issues that come up by having sounds that kind of creep up and we're constantly having to tame down the volume every step of the way during mixing. So I really hope you got a lot out of this, and please comment below of what you thought. I'll see you next week.